All right. Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. I know cybersecurity is not the most entertaining subject or sexy subject we could talk about. Matter of fact, a lot of people avoid this. It's kind of like going to the dentist or something, it seems. So what we have today is this is part one of a training that I normally do in person, like over a lunch and learn. Typically, it's about an hour and a half's worth of content, but I've tried to whittle it down into two parts. This is the first part. So you're kind of a guinea pig, and it's pretty heavy. There's a lot of information, so we'll get rolling. I may need to fast forward through some slides, possibly if we start running out of time, because I want to respect your time. So let me just introduce yourself. I know we have kind of a mixed audience today. So some clients are on here. You may just know about us and may have talked to you in the past, a business contact. So just want to let you know we have, and then your backgrounds may differ as well. If you're an IT person, we're not going to get into the weeds today. However, you can at the Q&A if you want to chat a little bit. It's not too technical for the group. I'll answer that. Or you can just email me on the side. I have my contact information at the end in case you need that. Most of you have it already. But I am Mario DiMarcantonio. I am the owner of Progressive IT Solutions. We're in Dallas, Texas. I've been in IT for a while, about 32 years this year. Yeah, I got in the early 90s, and I have quite an extensive background in the weeds. I've been in the trenches. I've done this stuff. And since about 2012, I founded Progressive IT Solutions, and now I'm mostly run the company. I dabble in the tech a little bit still. I still love it. Really passionate about, especially cybersecurity. Stopping the hackers really just lights my fire. I love, tricking them and stumbling them and then spotting them and locking them out, things like that. Just really get me going. So we focus mostly on private equity. When we do full IT support, we focus on private equity, venture capital, family offices, the high net worth types. That's kind of our group. Or a company that needs that level of service. It's more high touch. It's more responsive. We let you text our text directly. Like, we're really super responsive in that field. That's why we niche over there. We're a really good fit for them. And we also help out smaller IT departments. So if you're a small IT department, I've been in that role. I know there's a lot of frustrations, and you don't have enough either internal skills or time to do everything. So we help out like the 1 to 3, 4 person IT department that just needs a hand every now and then, or needs tools to get their job done, things like that. So that's just a little background of me. So let's talk about cybersecurity. The one main point I want to get across here is, you think about cybersecurity, you think IT, they're the person or the department or the company that handles it for you. But really, cybersecurity is just huge. Cybersecurity is such a big topic, as you can see from this graphic. It involves, yes, a lot of IT. A lot of this is IT, but it also involves leadership. It also involves every single employee. There are many things that govern cybersecurity and IT, like compliance and regulations, and they're always ever changing. And there's just so much involved. I just want you guys to get a picture of how big this is. It's more than any one person can handle. It's more than your IT department can handle by themselves. They need help. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So IT or cybersecurity is really a shared responsibility between the IT department, leadership, and employees. And some of those people, like even IT and leadership, we share a dual role. So you're also an employee. There's certain things you do as an employee as well. But we all have to work together to make this work well. And just so you know, there is no 100% absolute protection against being breached or having a ransomware attack or anything like that. If somebody's telling you that, they're either not telling the truth or something. It's just not possible to guarantee 100%, but you can get pretty close, and you can make yourself very unattractive to an attacker if you do the right things. So today we're going to talk about the first part. We're not going to get into a lot of practical application of what to do. That's part two. That's really heavy on all the things you can do specifically to protect yourself, protect your company, even at home. I've included some things like that. Today, we're going to talk about the different roles of everybody, the IT, the employees, the leadership. We're going to talk about cyber criminals and kind of the psyche of and the different types of cyber criminal that you may run across. And then we're going to talk about the top threats in 2024. You'll find that some of them have been around a while. They're still working. And then there's some new ones that you may have heard about in the news that we'll just surface level. We're going to talk about some of that stuff you might see. Again, not a technical deep dive. We have a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A if we need it. Pop quiz. And if you guys have access to your chat, pop it in here. What do you guys think the #1 cybersecurity weakness is in every single company? I don't care if it's the government, the NSA, Walmart, it doesn't matter. What do you guys think? I'll give you just a second. #1 weakness. It's not the firewall. All right. Well, if you guessed people, you're right, because people have been doing a really good job of opening the doors for cyber criminals ever since networks have been formed. And even before that, people have been getting fooled. And it's not that we're doing it on purpose. Everybody's a person, everybody's an employee, anybody's susceptible to getting tricked. And that's typically what happens. It's not intentional. It's just somebody's got fooled, basically, into clicking something they shouldn't. So they're doing things like, when you Google, you get a lot of website results for something you're maybe researching. Some of those websites could be infected with malware or bad programs that can infect your computer, or it may pop up something that says call support, you're infected or whatever. You may click on something, a program or a link you're not supposed to. You might get tricked. This is probably the biggest #1 thing that happens. You'll get fooled through what's called social engineering and phishing, typically, and a lot of times they work together, where you give up some information, whether it's an email that looks legitimate. The IT department just emailed you, for example, and this is going to break tonight. If you don't confirm your account, do it now. And then they want you to put in your email and password, and there you go. Your information's gone, and you've been compromised. So it's that easy. And some of them are better than others. It's easy to be fooled. So if it's happened to me, I'm sure it's happened to you guys at some point. Some of them are really good. Some of them are not so good. Disgruntled employees, you don't see it too often, but do keep it in mind, especially if you're leadership. Just because somebody's on the inside of your company doesn't necessarily mean they're to be 100% trusted, and things can change. Sometimes people just have things going on. They may be that kind of person that just steals your information and sells it to a competitor. So it's technically a data breach. Just happened from the inside. So bad password policies, we all know not to put passwords on Post-it notes and stick them on your monitors or under the keyboard where it's safe. Keeping them, using the same password everywhere, sharing your passwords with people, things like that. That's a lot of why passwords get compromised, and then they get used for attacks. And then training. So I want to commend you guys just for being here. A lot of people know they need security awareness training, or they know it's on the list and they're being asked about it, especially if you're leadership or IT. But what you need is a regular, consistent routine of training, test phishing your users, and the employees participating in that training like you're doing today. And if you're interested, we also do these trainings on site. We can do like a lunch and learn type thing. I've got my contact information at the end. If you guys haven't done one yet or are planning on doing one, hit us up. We can certainly take care of that for you. I find that they're more engaging, and you can get really specific to your company and ask questions related to your industry, things like that. So anyway, just wanted to put that little plug in there. So essentially IT, you can think about them as building your systems, supporting your systems, and protecting your data and systems. So they're kind of like the systems and data people, the people who guard. They create the Fort Knox, for example. Like, we can put all kinds of tools in to where it's hard to get anything from the outside. Even if you accidentally click something, we can have protections in there to have another safeguard there just in case. Think that's what IT does. But that's just part of the picture, as you saw earlier. Employees, your biggest role here is just to participate in this kind of training, first of all, and then be vigilant. And usually employees do really well with this. I get a lot of emails still personally where they'll ask if something's legitimate, and more times than not, it's not. It's their gut was right. But that's really your role, is just to remain alert, be vigilant. Who's walking around? Does this give me a gut feeling? Is something kind of off with this? Is it, am I getting emotional about this email? Things like that. Listen to your gut. And that's the best thing you can do, because really you're our first line of defense in IT. We have all this stuff protecting you, but you're the first line of defense. And if they get you, they get whatever you have access to sometimes, and then some. Leadership, if we have anybody in leadership on the call, you're not immune. And there's a lot of times I hear leaders say things like, or business owners, they'll say, oh, my IT has it covered. My IT has got it covered. They have this false sense of security that IT just takes care of everything. But the reality is IT departments, even IT companies that you outsource, they're limited on what they can do. Some are also better than others, but there's a lot of limitations. Sometimes their hands are tied. They may recommend some things, but they didn't get approved, or you're not responding to the email. You may not be working with them. But let me tell you, if you get a ransomware attack and everything's shut down, and it's because you didn't approve something that your IT has been barking about for the last 2 years, guess who's going to be in the camera when the news comes by? So you need to be involved in things like setting policies, like acceptable use policy, what you can do with your devices on your network, helping to establish a budget for IT and cybersecurity that's reasonable, and implementing the proper controls. Reporting, you may report to the board or other leadership, but definitely get some reporting from your IT people as well about, the state of the network is a good one, how many things projects they're working on, things they've blocked, things they're doing for you. So a lot of times it's hard to see the return on investment, and this kind of reporting helps you get an idea of what your IT department is doing as well. And then accountability, like I mentioned, if something hits the fan, it's the IT guy might get fired. Okay, so he goes and gets another job. But you're the one as a leader of the company or an owner that's really accountable for what goes on in your company. It's just the same thing as like a CPA doing your taxes. They'll do all the taxes for you, but they're just a professional service. You're still responsible for that tax return to the IRS. Same thing with IT and cybersecurity. So be sure you're talking with your IT department and collaborating together to create things like incident response plans and business continuity plans and all that. So leaders, you're not off the hook. Big responsibility. So let's talk about cyber criminals, who they are, where they're from, what they're after, things like that. In our heads, a lot of times we think about things like this. Like you think, oh, it's going to be Iran, it's going to be North Korea, China, Russia attacking. And sometimes it is. It's always from outside the United States, apparently. But I haven't met a hacker yet that actually wears a mask. But this is kind of like the image we have of hackers, some kind of dim lit room with a bunch of computers. Anyway, maybe they look like that. And yes, nation states are a real thing. Hopefully you aren't on the receiving end of one of them. Let's go to the different types of cyber criminals. So the point here is crime is crime. It's pretty much the same thing as it used to be before computers. There's still con men, there's still pickpockets, there's still spies, and there's still nations that have, organizations that are really good at what they do. So there's all different levels. And it's the same thing with cybercrime. There is organized crime, organized cybercrime that is a business. And, there's organizations that actually run as a business. There are just petty cyber thieves. There are nation states that are involved in things. You'll hear those in the news typically. But anyway, the point is they're all kinds, and they're called threat actors. If your IT people talk to you, sometimes they may use that term, threat actor. Basically bad guys. In reality, they can look like anybody. So just try not to have a stereotype of what a cyber criminal looks like in your head. They're just people. Sometimes they can be your delivery driver. Sometimes they can be your cleaning person, especially if you're what we're going to get into later, if you're a high value target. High value targets, they do a lot more to get to you. And you may actually see somebody dressed up like your delivery driver in that case. Most people are not going to have to worry about that. Probably 90% of the world doesn't have to, but there are a few types of people and companies that they really love and they'll put the extra energy into. The one thing they mostly have in common is the money. Almost always it's about money, Bitcoin. So it's usually the money, follow the money. Sometimes it's about disruption. Sometimes it's about stealing the information. It can happen, but almost always it's the money. So who are they after? First of all, the answer to that is every single person. A lot of times people think because they have a small business, or even if they're an individual, that they're not at risk. And that's just really not true. if there's a movie out called The Beekeeper, if you guys haven't seen it, it's a really good movie about an old lady who has a lot of money in her nest egg and she gets hacked. I won't say anything else. It's a good movie though, but it just goes to show it's, even though it's fiction, it's reality. People with money, they're after anybody, really anybody. And the reality is people who aren't sophisticated, or the companies that aren't sophisticated or tech savvy, are easier targets. So it's easy for them to get in and get what they want. So everyone is at risk. Nobody's immune. You just don't hear about everyone in the news. That's just the reality of it. So let's talk about high value targets. High value target is somebody or a company or an industry that either has a lot of cash, it might be a high net worth person, or a group of people that are older or maybe not tech savvy. They might try to take advantage of that. Industries like healthcare, oil and gas, critical infrastructure, they know if they can disrupt a hospital, that people need care, that can't stop, and they're more than likely going to pay the ransom. That's why you hear about healthcare ransomware attacks and cyber attacks, because they know they're not going to let that stop for too long, and their chances of getting ransomware payments are higher. So we're in a political year too. Sometimes there's extra involvement with cyber attacks and misinformation campaigns and things like that happen. So these are high value targets. These are the ones that the criminals are going to take more time to get to. They'll use tools like, they're going to do due diligence, basically, just like you're buying something like a house or a company or something. They'll do their homework. They'll use tools that we all use, like Google, maybe some AI. They might check your social media. They might check your family's social media to kind of build a background and a demographic picture of you before they do their attack. There's also some more advanced tools that aren't on this list that they'll use. And the more information they have beforehand, the better, because then they know they can answer security questions to your phone carrier if they've got enough of it. We won't get into too much of that in this one, but in part 2, we talk more about that. So let's go into, now that we have a little bit of background, let's talk about the top security threats that are out there. Some aren't going to surprise you. They've been around a while, like this one, phishing. It's still probably the most popular thing that's going on because it's effective. Phishing, it's changed a little bit in how they do it. Used to, email was the main way. It still is the main way, but there's more phishing attempts through different channels now. So phishing, just think about it. It's a lot like real phishing. They're just casting their line out there. They've got a certain bait on it. They're trying to catch a certain fish. Sometimes they use a net and they're trying to catch a bunch of fish. Sometimes they're after one type of fish. Sometimes it's a harpoon and they're going after a big fish, things like that. That's where these terms come from. So phishing essentially is just, it's a type of scam where the person is just trying to get you to click on something or give up some personal information like a credit card number or your password, username and password. That's the most common one. That's what phishing is in general. There are types of phishing. Here's a few. We've all heard of things like the generic email phishing is the things like the Nigerian prince scam. We've all seen it because that's a generic email that went out to the world. They weren't going after anybody specific. They just cast a wide net. They wanted to get responses in it. And I haven't seen it in a while, but it was out there for quite a while. Most of us have run across it. That's how big that one was. Spear phishing, as we go down the line here, the efforts on the part of the attacker get a little bit more intense because they have to do some homework. Spear phishing is if I was an attacker and I was going after an organization or a specific company or a group of people. So it's a more narrow target of what I'm going after. It may be the leadership. That gets into whaling too. So whaling is actually where I would pick a company or a company related to a company and just target the leaders, like the CFO, the CEO, the controller. People with the money, people with authority would be the target of that one. Which moves you into CEO fraud down there in the bottom left. So CEO fraud, you've probably seen the emails where it's your boss sending you an email. It's really not your boss. It just says his name or her name. And the reply to address, if you click reply, it actually goes to some junk email. That's a bad one. That's a poorly done pickpocket type attack. The one you got to worry about is the one that's actually your CEO and actually their return email address. That you need to call your IT department like right away, because that probably got compromised and you need to get in there. Those are very serious. So I'm going to spend a little time on them in a second. Phishing can come through text. Have you guys ever gotten an SMS message that says, you know, your FedEx package is late, or your UPS or USPS. That's a really common text message, but also apps like WhatsApp. Another thing that instant messenger of any kind of messaging. Another popular one I've seen is where they'll just try to start a conversation with you. Hey, how are you? And it's just a text. And then I play with them sometimes. I'm fine. Who's this? And they'll go back and forth. But the whole goal of that is they're trying to trick me out of something. It's just somebody blasting a bunch of text numbers trying to get responses. So I toy with them sometimes. And then phone, it's called vishing or voice phishing. It could actually be a person calling you. So it might be somebody on the other end of the line. And if it is, they're going to be using a combination of social engineering or tricking you, and possibly some phishing, trying to get something from you or get you to do something. Sometimes those are automated calls. I just want to let you know that phishing can come from many channels. So again, we're not going to talk about a lot of the proactive things you can do, but just how to spot a phishing email just quickly. Look at the reply to address. That's usually an indicator if it's fake. It may say your CEO, but it may be a Gmail address or some junk address that it goes back to. The things we're used to looking for, like poor grammar, spelling, the syntax is wrong, things aren't plural, things like that, you'll spot, or it may not sound like the person you know. Usually there's some emotion attached to it. A lot of times there's an attachment that they want you to click and do something with. Hovering over a link. So for years, you may have gotten the tip that you can just hover over the link and see where it goes and see if it's safe to click. Most of the time that's true, but I'll show you an example here in a second why you can't trust that 100%. Generally, don't click links, especially if your gut is telling you something's wrong with this email. Listen to your gut. 99% of the time, your gut is always right. And even if you're wrong and delete the thing, if it's legitimate, they're going to try and get back with you again, or they're going to call you or something, or try to hit you through your phone or something like that. So it's pretty safe to delete things if you feel it. So here's a few tricky things. So pay attention to this screen. I've numbered them 1 through 6. Try to spot the ones that you think by number that are not legit. I'll give you just a second to look at these. Can't spend too much time here, but I'm going to show you some tricky things that they do here. So on number 2, 1 and 2 look really close, don't they? This is why you can't hover over a link necessarily and know where it goes, because lowercase l and uppercase I look the same. And when it's typed like this, they're 2 totally different places on the internet. I can set up an email address under AIIPro.com, and it looks like allpro.com. And I can send and receive emails back and forth. And I might trick a user thinking they're talking to a different company back and forth until I get what I want. Zeros look like O's sometimes. Number 5, a little tricky. If you're tech savvy at all, you usually get this one. But some people, they try to create these domain names that sound kind of like they're real. Microsoft-online-email.com. I mean, that could fool some people if they weren't tech savvy. And then sometimes fonts matter. They could use a certain font, and certain letters put together may look like another letter at a glance. I know that our brains can catch this if you pay attention to it, but we're busy, we're hectic, especially if you're emotional and it's quick and you weren't thinking. Things like this can trick you. So just be aware of it. The big bad boy, number 2, is, besides phishing, is business email compromise. This is really serious, inexpensive usually. This happens when somebody's email has literally gotten compromised by somebody. They're in as the person. So I would be in as your CEO, for example, sending and receiving emails. So what's bad about this is that they have access to all your sent items, everything you have in your mailbox, any attachments you got. I can search for things like the word password or wiring instructions and all that through all your stuff, all the notes you have with your passwords, contacts with passwords in them. All that stuff is findable and searchable. The good news is most companies are protecting against this through multi-factor authentication, which is just, you need to know the username and password and have a code to get in. Most of the time that works, and a lot of companies have this now. If you don't, please implement it or get with your IT people. Make sure they've got that on your email. It does have weaknesses, though. there are ways around it depending on how it's set up and if the person gets tricked. So it's not 100%, but it's pretty good, and it'll prevent a lot of this. If you ever get actual business email compromise, you need to talk to IT right away. A lot of times legal gets involved, forensics. You may have to do some breach reporting, definitely some forensics to at least reset the password, lock it out. You got to do some homework to see how far these people went. Most of the time when I've seen this, they'll create rules in Outlook, if you guys have ever seen that, where they move messages around as they're talking to people. So the person that actually has the phone won't know that anybody's in there. It's pretty tricky. Anyway, lost my thought there, but anyway, that's kind of how it works. Just make sure you got MFA on your account, and make sure you contact IT if you ever see this, and act on it quickly. Okay, ransomware and malware. Malware is just simply bad software. Ransomware is a flavor of malware. Okay, malware or ransomware is still the #1 business disruptor out there, in that it scrambles all your data, that whatever it has access to. Sometimes it scrambles your backups if they're not set up properly. Sometimes it's saved to your backups, so even when you try to restore from them, it's there. So it's just a bad day. One new thing they've been doing over the last few years is they will actually not just scramble your data, but they'll take an extra copy of it and they'll sell it on the dark web, or they'll extort you later with it, or bribe you into paying more money. You have two choices. You can pay the ransom, which the government says not to. Some companies still do. Or you can restore all your systems from your backup from scratch, or whatever got corrupted. Either way, your employees can't work, productivity tanks. It's just a bad place to be. Some companies don't come back from this, and other companies struggle, or organizations, as we'll see in a second. It's just a bad place to be. Preventing ransomware is #1. You may have read in the news last year, in May, the city of Dallas got a ransomware attack. And they're still talking about it here in October on the left. If you look down on the right, the city council had to approve $8.5 million to pay for the expenses related to the ransomware attack. And if you remember the story, they were having trouble even working for a while, and it took them a long time to even get back up. So it's just a bad place to be. I'm not going to get into detail here. I just want you to know there are other types of bad things out there. Here's some of them. They're not all bad, like scareware and adware usually aren't damaging. They're just annoying, and they don't really do the damage. The other things, adware, questionable. They do damage, some of them. Some are really bad, like rootkits, but you may have heard of these. I just want you to know these terms in case you ever hear about them. They're just all types of malware. Let's talk social engineering for a minute. I know we're running short on time. Social engineering is just simply people trying to con you out of information. It can happen in many different kinds of ways. In person, over the phone. Those are the most successful kinds, because a human is tricking you. And some of them are really good at what they do. And again, they can look like anybody. Wire fraud, I wanted to bring this up because it's so popular. It's one of the big hacks, and one of the ways they get money. Before we get in there, how many of you think that wire fraud is FDIC insured? You don't have to answer it, but just think about it. It isn't. FDIC insurance is just protection against the bank failing. It's not protection against you being fooled into allowing somebody into your account. When that happens, even other protections will look at how much did you do to stop it or prevent it in advance. Are you doing bad password practices? Do you have any kind of checks on your wire transfer process? They'll look at things like that to determine if they're going to pay your claim, essentially. Here's a few tips. I can't go into all these because we're running out of time, but you can get a copy of this slide or a recording if you like. Just email me at the end. Let's talk about the dark web for a second. The internet's huge. The web is huge. Most of what we do is called the surface web. It's just the browsing and shopping and news and all that stuff. The dark web lives at the bottom. It makes up a really small percentage. You can't accidentally get to the dark web. You have to know what you're doing and where you're going, and use special tools like a Tor browser to get there. But that's where all this illicit stuff happens, especially selling and buying your personal information that's been exposed through phishing attacks or breaches of companies like LinkedIn. That's where all this stuff gets sold and bought. Just want to let you know, it's just a small portion where illicit things happen, all kinds of things. If you guys haven't, if you're a client of ours, we've probably done one of these for you, especially if you're a regular managed client. But if not, if you want me to pull a free dark web report on if you're just an employee, I can do your personal email or your work email and give you that report. If you're a leader, an IT leader or a business owner, I can give you your whole company's report. It's got redacted information, but it'll tell you who's been exposed, when, where, and a portion of their password you'll be able to see so that you can notify them and let them know, hey, this has been compromised, because we use the same password in a lot of places, unfortunately, and then they'd want to go change that password because it's out there for sale. Just scan the code or visit that URL. And again, you can get a copy of this if you want. Two new threats: AI, deepfakes. I know we're going over, so if some of you have to drop off, you can. We're right at 30 minutes. And I can send you a copy if you want to catch up on it. AI, voice AI is becoming huge, where they can clone a voice, sounds like a person you know, and they try to trick you out of into sending them money. That's one. The other thing is deepfakes. Deepfakes are where it's an AI, but they're altering video where it looks real. And here's a couple, and it's not just a video you watch, it's a Zoom call, for example. Here's an example on the left where this is a company in Hong Kong. Poor guy got tricked into, through a video conferencing session with who he thought was his CFO and some others. They use deepfake technology to act as their leadership. Fooled the guy. He lost $25 million. I'm sure he's out of a job by now. It's just bad. And these are the kinds of things that are happening now, and they're just going to get more and more sophisticated. Just be aware, what you see is not always what you get anymore. It used to be better. Now it's not. So just keep that in mind. Think about your vendors, anybody who can have physical access to your systems or has access to some of your data. Those are people you need to be concerned about too, because they have their set of cybersecurity weaknesses too. Those can leak into yours. If they get hacked, then sometimes you can get hacked as a result. Software, this is hard to stop, but here's a couple examples of what we're talking about here. In the middle, Russia right now is really hot and heavy about getting into Microsoft's what's called their source code, their core code. Windows, for example, Microsoft Office, if they can get in and hack that or some update for that, and then that gets passed to, think about all the billions of computers that run it, that's a win for them. So they're actively trying to get into the code. It's scary because we don't have much control over that. But that's the kind of thing that goes on in the background here, and that's how serious some of these are. Sometimes I get asked this, are QR codes safe? The short answer is yes and no. They can be if they go to a legitimate website. They're just a link to a website. You scan this. Sometimes you may scan it. It's kind of cool. I use them, but they go to a website link, and that link could be infected. So if it seems like it's coming from a legitimate source, it's probably safe. I don't see a lot of QR code scams yet, but I've heard of some. So just be careful, just like anything else. Other things to worry about, attackers, cyber criminals, they always take advantage of what's going on in the news, any disaster, holidays. You might get emails about buying gift cards and sending them the codes and things like that. Invoice scams for invoices for work that was never done. They try to fool your accounting department into paying them. Employees who aren't really employees saying they need an ACH change on their payroll. Next thing you know, you've sent somebody's payroll to a scammer. That's a bad day. So what we're going to cover in part two, just briefly, we're going to talk a lot about some practical tips. Really, this is where the meat of it is, of what you can do to prevent and really make yourself really unattractive to cyber criminals, so where they'll just move on to somebody else that's easier. And we're going to talk about some of those things are really sneaky, you might not think about. So if you enjoyed this, you really love part two, please be there, because it's got a lot of good stuff in it. Again, here's the dark web scan information if you need it, or shoot me an email. I'll give you a copy of the slides. You can scan it there. All right, so we are at Q&A. I went a couple minutes over. Apologies, 4 minutes. So if you've got any questions, just pop them in the Q&A or the chat. Either one's fine. I'm watching both, and we can check them out. Oh, somebody told me chat shows disabled. It's Q&A. Okay, so put it in Q&A. Maybe chat is not working, and we can go from there. Okay, so Blake, clicking questionable links in an email. Spam is an issue. Blacklisting. This is long, Blake. Not sure most of us have used this function. So you're saying that unsubscribe is a great way to cut down on clutter. Not sure most of us have used. Yeah, I've thought about it. So what you're saying is essentially unsubscribe can be an effective way to reduce spam. Yeah, yes and no. Sometimes I've unsubscribed and I know I keep getting emails. So sometimes even when it's legitimate, they still come. Um, yeah, that could be a link that goes to a place that, again, delete. Like it's probably, my gut says delete on those. A lot of times, unless I know it's legitimate, I won't even go through the unsubscribe process. I will just delete it and then tag it in Outlook as junk email. So if they send again, it goes to junk and I don't see it. There's no really good answer to spam. And there is for malicious emails, if they have some infected attachment or something. But as far as like spam, it's really hard to stop because they're always kind of doing things to get around spam filters. And sometimes unsubscribe, they don't unsubscribe you, or it takes weeks or months or never happens. So I haven't seen a case where the unsubscribe has been weaponized yet. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened. I just live in Dallas, in my little bubble. So good question though. I'm sure it's happened. I'm sure it's happened. All right. Let's see. Anybody else have questions about any of the stuff we covered or anything else related to awareness? Next week's going to be, or next time's going to be really fun. All right. Okay, so Matt, you're asking, I have our employees use Fish Alert report button in Outlook and KnowBe4. Excellent. We use KnowBe4 as well. Perfect. Because that, if you guys don't use KnowBe4 for your cybersecurity awareness training, they give you, I still think they're the best. I think the content is the best. They're the most mature cybersecurity awareness training program company out there. Kevin Mitnick was one of their partners, if you guys know him, if you're geeky. But they have good videos. They're engaging. They're constantly working on their content, and you can fish your users at different levels. And if somebody clicks on something, you can put them in another set of remediation videos, and you can run reports to see who your heavy clickers are, i.e., the receptionists and the leadership, almost always. It's a really cool product, and they have a little thing you can add to Outlook called the Fish Alert. And it's just like a fish hook. If you suspect an email is fishy, it'll click it and it sends it to your IT people to check out, basically. Yeah, good move. And that keeps people more aware. Like having that right in front of you and training your people to click it, perfect. Because last thing it's always better to just be on the safe side and listen to your gut and be safe, better safe than sorry, especially with malware and breaches and all that. Because once it's done, if you get a data breach or a ransomware, bad day for everybody. Oh my God, better to be safe and accidentally click something or send something in to be checked out or bother your IT people. Good question, Matt. Anything else? Just a couple. I know it's a lot of information to process. Again, I tried to whittle this down. It was a huge presentation. Trying to break it in two pieces was a little challenging. So, all right. Well, if no more questions, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's time. Please try to join us for part 2. I'll send out a reminder email to everybody. It's going to have really a lot of good stuff that's practical. You can even share it with your mother or grandma. It's stuff like that that can really keep anybody safe online, but especially a business, and especially if you're a high value target. There's so much in there that you need to be paying attention to. All right, everybody, thank you, and I appreciate your time, and we will talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.